I want to tell you something before I get into it. The morning after my mother's birthday party, the party I paid for, every single dollar of it, I sat in the parking lot of a Kroger on Morse Road and ate a gas station granola bar for breakfast because I'd forgotten to go grocery shopping. Again, my daughter was at school. My phone had 17 unread messages. And for the first time in maybe 2 years, I was completely perfectly calm. That probably sounds wrong. It'll make sense later. My name is Claire Hadley. I'm 34 years old. I work as a contracts manager at a commercial real estate firm in Columbus, which sounds more impressive than it is. Mostly it means I spend my days reading language that other people wrote carelessly and flagging the parts that could blow up later. I'm good at it. Patterns, inconsistencies, the thing buried on page 9 that everyone else glossed over. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. Zoe is 7. She has my ex-husband Derek's curly hair and absolutely none of his patience for sitting still, which is the one thing she inherited from him that I'm genuinely grateful for. She narrates everything: the grocery store, the drive to school, the plot of whatever book she's currently obsessed with. She spins in parking lots. She talks to strangers' dogs. She is by every reasonable metric a complete handful. She is also the best thing I have ever done. Derek and I split when Zoe was 4, amicably, more or less, which in practice means we coexist in the bland, polite way of people who once loved each other and now share a Google Calendar. He's remarried, lives in Westerville, takes Zoe every other weekend. It's fine. Everything about that chapter is fine, in the specific way that means I don't think about it anymore. My family is different. My family I have always thought about. My mother, Diane, turned 60 in October. My sister, Rachel, 31, married to a man named Brian, who sells insurance and has opinions about grilling lives 20 minutes from my parents in Gahanna. My dad, Gary, is the kind of man who has spent 40 years being agreeable and has mistaken that for being good. He's not bad, he's just not there, exactly. Never has been. We are not a close family in the way people mean when they say that warmly. We are close in the way that means you can't get away. And for most of my life, I confused those two things. If those first few lines already got you, you're going to want to stay for everything that comes next. Hit subscribe and drop a like so you don't miss a single part. Now let's get back to it. My mother started talking about her 60th birthday party in July, which is fine. It's a milestone. She was excited. I was excited for her. She wanted something elegant, a venue, a caterer, a photographer specifically because she'd seen someone's party photos on Facebook and decided that was the version of her life she wanted documented. I volunteered immediately. I said I'd help plan it and contribute financially, and I meant both things. I transferred my portion $1,200 in August. It was, though nobody acknowledged this, the largest individual contribution from anyone in the family. Rachel put in $400. Brian put in $400 from their joint account, which Rachel mentioned twice like it was notable. The group chat was called Mom's Big 60, with a champagne emoji. I muted it within 2 days because of the champagne emoji, but I stayed in it. The first sign was so small I almost missed it. Early September. Rachel texted me separately, not in the group chat. Hey, quick thing, I was talking to Mom and she mentioned the photographer. Apparently he's really focused on candid shots and clean compositions. You know how Zoe gets. I read it twice. You know how Zoe gets. I wrote back, what does that mean? Rachel sent 3 dots. Then, she's just really energetic, LOL. Mom was wondering if maybe it would be easier if Zoe sat this one out. Like you could come, obviously. Just maybe leave her with Derek that weekend. I put my phone face down on the kitchen counter and went to do the dishes. I washed every single dish in the sink before I picked it back up. I'll talk to Mom, I wrote. I called my mother that night after Zoe was asleep. I kept my voice even. I asked her directly, was she asking me not to bring my daughter to her birthday party? It's not like that, sweetheart. Her voice was warm. It was always warm. You know how these things are. The photographer is expensive, and Zoe's she's a lot. She'll be running around, she'll want attention, and I just want one nice event where everything goes smoothly. You understand? Do I? She's 7, Mom. I know how old she is. A small pause. You can bring her to the next thing. The Christmas dinner, whatever. This is just one afternoon. I waited for something else. An apology, maybe. An acknowledgement that what she was saying was strange. It didn't come. Okay, I said, because I didn't know what else to say. Because I had been saying okay to this woman my entire life. I should have pulled out then. I know that now. Instead, I went to a family dinner in late September, my parents' house on Bryden Road, the one I grew up in. with the kitchen that always smells like the same lavender candle. And I tried again. Gently. I said I'd been thinking about it, and I wasn't comfortable leaving Zoe out of a family event. My dad looked at his plate. Rachel said, "It's not that big a deal, Claire." Brian said nothing, which is his primary contribution to most situations. My mother said, "I knew you were going to make this about you. And then I'm not exaggerating this. I'm not embellishing it." My dad laughed. Not a big laugh, just a small, helpless, "she's right, you know," laugh that he does when he wants to agree without committing to anything. And Rachel smiled. The kind of smile that means, "See, even Dad thinks so." I looked around that table. 4 people. I have known 3 of them my entire life. I excused myself to use the bathroom and stood at the sink for a long time, running cold water over my wrists, staring at the same wallpaper border my mother put up in 1998. They think this is fine, I thought. They genuinely think this is fine. The morning of my mother's birthday party was a Saturday in mid-October. Cold. The kind of Columbus October that comes in overnight and doesn't apologize. Gray sky, orange leaves pressed flat against wet pavement. Zoe wanted pancakes. I made pancakes. I cut hers into triangles because she'd decided, sometime in the last month, that circles were boring. We watched half a Bluey episode together while she ate. I didn't tell her about the party. I had told her we were going to do something fun instead, and I'd meant it. My phone buzzed at 10:14 a.m. It was Rachel. Not a call, a text. "Hey, did your Venmo go through? Venue needs final headcount confirmation, and they want the payment screenshots." Not, "Are you doing okay?" Not, "We missed you at the planning meeting last week." Not even, "Hope you and Zoe have a good day." Just, "Did your Venmo go through?" I looked at my daughter. She was telling her fork about something that had happened at recess. Her curly hair was half out of the ponytail I'd put in that morning. There was syrup on her elbow. They were never going to invite her, I thought. They just needed the money. The Venmo confirmation was already sent. I'd transferred it in August. $1,200 that was. At this exact moment, being used to pay for a venue my daughter wasn't allowed to enter. I put my phone down. I finished my coffee. I took Zoe to the Lind Fruit Farm out in Patascala because they had a corn maze and a petting zoo, and she'd been asking about the petting zoo for 3 weeks. She fed a goat and absolutely lost her mind about it. I took about 40 pictures. On the drive home, somewhere on Route 16, I made a decision. Not an emotional one, not a revenge fantasy, just a quiet, clear decision, the way you decide to finally read the fine print on something you've been signing for years. I was going to go home. I was going to open a folder I hadn't looked at since my grandmother's funeral, and I was going to start reading. I didn't know yet what I'd find, but I remember thinking, I am very good at finding things. She was going to find something in that folder, something that had been there the whole time, something nobody thought she'd ever look for. The folder was in the bottom drawer of my desk. Hanging file, craft paper, labeled in my own handwriting, Grandma Lottie Estate. I hadn't opened it since 2018. I made a cup of coffee first. Zoe was asleep. We'd gotten home late from the farm. She'd crashed in the car, and I'd carried her in still, smelling like hay and apple cider donuts. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that has weight to it. I sat down at the kitchen table and opened the folder. My grandmother, Charlotte Hadley, everyone called her Lottie, died in January of 2017. She was 81, sharp until the very end, and the only person in my family who ever made me feel like I was worth paying attention to. She used to send me cards with newspaper clippings inside articles she thought I'd find interesting, always with a little handwritten note in the margin. "Thought of you," or "You'd be good at this," or "Just read this one." I missed her, still, quietly, the way you miss someone you never got enough of. Her estate wasn't large. She'd lived in the same house in Worthington for 40 years, and by the time she passed, the only significant asset left was a rental property, a small 2-bedroom on Indianola Avenue that she'd owned since the 80s. She rented it to Ohio State students. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. I remembered, vaguely, being told there was a trust. I remembered signing something at my mother's kitchen table about a month after the funeral, while my mother poured iced tea and Rachel sat across from me checking her phone. I remembered thinking I should read it more carefully. I remembered not doing that. You were grieving, I told myself now, sitting at my own kitchen table 6 years later. You trusted them. I unfolded the document. The trust language was clear, almost insultingly so, once I actually read it. Charlotte Hadley's rental property on Indianola Avenue was to be held in equal shares by her two granddaughters, Claire Ann Hadley and Rachel Lynn Hadley. Any rental income generated by the property was to be divided equally. In the event of a sale, proceeds were to be split equally. That was what Grandma Lottie wanted. She'd written it herself, with a Worthington estate attorney named Gerald Foss. She'd signed it in 2015, 2 years before she died. She'd been very clear. I set the trust document down and sat very still for a moment. Then I opened my laptop and went to the Franklin County Auditor's website. The property on Indianola was still listed, still active. I typed in the address and waited for the ownership record to load. Current owner, Rachel L. Hoffman. Rachel's married name. No joint ownership. No Claire Hadley anywhere on the record. Transfer date, April 14th, 2018. 15 months after my grandmother died. 7 months after I'd signed something at my mother's kitchen table while Rachel checked her phone. My coffee went cold. I didn't notice. I want to be honest about what happened next, because I've heard people describe moments like this as clarity, as rage, as some kind of righteous fire. It wasn't any of those things. It was more like a very slow, very cold feeling of oh. The way you feel when you finally understand the end of a story you've been reading for years and realize the foreshadowing was always there. Of course, I thought. Of course. I didn't cry. I wanted to maybe, but nothing came. I just sat there in my quiet apartment while my daughter slept in the next room, and I thought about all the times I had been the one to drive to my parents' house for Sunday dinners. All the times I had covered the cost of something without being asked, the new water heater the year my parents had a rough patch, the graduation party for Rachel, the plane tickets when my dad had the procedure in 2021 and nobody had the savings. All the times I had made myself smaller so the family could stay intact. And the whole time there had been a property on Indianola Avenue generating rental income that was half mine. How much? I wondered. What does 6 years of rental income look like? I did not answer that question that night. I closed my laptop. I washed my coffee cup. I checked on Zoe, who was starfished across her bed with her mouth open, completely unconscious, her curly hair spread out on the pillow. I turned off her lamp. I went to bed. I did not sleep well, but I did sleep. In the morning, I called a real estate attorney. Her name was Patricia Odom. I found her through the Ohio State Bar Referral Service, which felt appropriately methodical, and her office was in a glass building off High Street near the Short North. I made an appointment for the following Thursday. I told Zoe I had a work meeting, which was close enough. Patricia was 50-something, direct, with reading glasses on a beaded chain and absolutely no patience for hedging. I liked her immediately. I laid out everything in the order I'd organized it. The trust document, the auditor record, the transfer date, the gap between what my grandmother's will specified and what had actually happened. She read. She did not speak for a while. "This signature on the transfer document," she said finally, tapping a page I hadn't seen before. She'd pulled it from the county recording office herself. "Is this your signature?" I looked at it. My name, Claire A. Hadley, in handwriting that was close, but not quite. A little too looped, a little too even. "No," I said. Patricia took her glasses off. "Okay." She set them on the desk. "I want to be very precise with you. What you're describing, if the signature is fraudulent, and if the transfer was made without your knowledge or consent, is not a civil dispute. Do you understand what I'm saying?" I understood. "What are my options?" I asked. She gave me 3. I listened to all of them. I asked questions. I took notes in a small spiral notebook I'd brought, the same kind I use for work, because that's how my brain works. I need to write things down to know they're real. When I left her office, it was starting to rain, that thin November rain that Columbus does for about 6 weeks straight every fall. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment with my umbrella not yet open, just feeling it on my face. They forged my signature, I thought. My mother and my sister sat me down at a kitchen table a month after my grandmother died and had me sign something, and then they used whatever I signed to transfer a property that was half mine, or they hadn't needed me to sign anything at all. They'd just done it without me, using a signature that wasn't mine. Either way, they'd had 6 years to tell me. 6 years of Sunday dinners and Christmas mornings and a birthday party I'd funded with $1,200. They'd chosen not to. Here's what I did not do in the weeks that followed. I did not call my mother. I did not text Rachel. I did not bring it up at Thanksgiving. Yes, I went to Thanksgiving, because pulling away suddenly would have told them something, and I wasn't ready for them to know anything yet. I sat at that table and ate my mother's green bean casserole and listened to Brian talk about his pellet grill and I smiled at the right times, and I helped do the dishes after. "You're so good," my mother told me, drying a serving bowl. "I don't know what we'd do without you." "I do," I thought. "You'd find someone else." What I did do, quietly, across those weeks, I contacted the county recorder's office and requested the full chain of title documents for the Indianola property. I made a spreadsheet, nothing dramatic, just dates, figures, a log of what I knew versus what I could prove. I called Patricia Odom twice more with follow-up questions. I pulled my grandmother's original estate filing from the probate court records because those are public and I knew where to look. And one evening in late November, while Zoe was at Derek's for the weekend, I sat alone and did the math. The Indianola house had rented for an average of $1,400 a month since 2017. 6 years, 12 months a year, half of that income was mine, per the trust my grandmother had signed. I found a calculator. I did not need one, but I used it anyway, the way you sometimes want the number to come from somewhere outside yourself. $50,400, give or take. That was what my half came to, conservatively, before I factored in the property's current value, which had increased, as everything in Columbus had increased, considerably. I set the calculator down on the kitchen table. I thought about the granola bar I'd eaten in the Kroger parking lot the morning after the party. I thought about the $1,200 I'd Venmo'd without hesitation. I thought about the water heater, the plane tickets, every quiet act of generosity that had always been absorbed without acknowledgement, like water into dry ground. Then I thought about something else. Something Patricia had mentioned in passing during our second call, almost as a footnote. There may also be an issue with the pending sale. I sat up straighter. What pending sale? A beat of silence. You didn't know? The property's listed. It went under contract about 3 weeks ago. Closing is scheduled for mid-January. The room was very quiet. Rachel is selling it, I thought. She's selling it right now. And once that closes, once that money moves, this gets significantly more complicated. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Patricia. I didn't call anyone. I opened my notes app and started writing. Not a list of grievances. Not a letter I'd never send. Just a plan, clear, sequential, organized. The way I organize everything at work. The way I've always been good at. Identifying exactly what leverage exists and exactly when to use it. Thanksgiving had been last week. Christmas was 4 weeks away. My mother was already texting about Christmas dinner. Perfect, I thought. And for the first time since October, I smiled genuinely privately at my phone screen in the dark. I had a closing date. I had Patricia. I had the trust document with my grandmother's signature on it, and a transfer document with a signature that wasn't mine. And now I had a deadline. They thought she was still the same Claire, the one who did the dishes and said okay and never pushed back. They had no idea she'd already made an appointment, or that she'd already chosen the night to use it. The first thing I did was apologize. I know how that sounds, but listen, I'd spent enough years working in contracts to know that the most dangerous thing you can do before a negotiation is let the other side know it's coming. So the week after I made my plan, I called my mother. I kept my voice warm. I said I'd been distant lately and I was sorry, that I'd been stressed with work, that I didn't want things to be weird between us going into the holidays. She was so relieved it almost broke my heart. "I knew you'd come around," she said. "You always do." "I know," I said. "I know I do." I meant both of those sentences differently than she did. December arrived the way it always does in Columbus, grudgingly, with freezing rain and everyone driving badly. Zoe's school did a holiday pageant. She was cast as a reindeer and took the role so seriously that she practiced her antler headband walk around our apartment for a full week beforehand. I filmed every rehearsal. I watched her from the third row of folding chairs in the school gymnasium and felt something so fierce and clean it was almost like anger, but wasn't. This is what they called too wild, I thought. This exact thing. This kid right here. I clapped the loudest in the room. She found my face in the crowd and beamed. Patricia had sent me the formal demand letter by the first week of December. It was 3 pages, precise and measured, outlining the fraudulent transfer, the 6 years of rental income owed to me, and my legal entitlement to 50% of the pending property sale, which was scheduled to close January 14th. The letter stated that if the matter was not resolved voluntarily within 30 days, she would file in Franklin County Court of Common Pleas. I read it 4 times. It was exactly right. It was the kind of document that lands on a table and does not get ignored. I did not send it yet. Instead, I called my father. I want to be careful about how I describe my dad, Gary, because he is not a villain in this story. He is something more frustrating than that, a man who has spent his whole life inside the path of least resistance, who confused keeping the peace with being peaceful, and who had no idea, I was about to learn, how much had been done in the quiet around him. We met for lunch at a Bob Evans off Morse Road, because that is where my father has eaten lunch since approximately 1987, and I was not going to fight him on it. I ordered coffee. He ordered the farmer's feast, like he always does. I've been going through some of Grandma Lottie's old papers, I said, once we'd been talking long enough that it didn't sound like an ambush. For tax stuff. You remember the property she left us, the house on Indianola? My dad cut into his sausage. Vaguely. Your mother handled all of that. Right. Do you know what ended up happening with it? He looked up. Something crossed his face, not guilt exactly. More like discomfort. The face of a man who has been not asking questions for a very long time and has gotten good at it. I think it sold. Early on, there wasn't much left after fees. He said it the same way my mother had said it, the same words almost. There wasn't much left after fees. Rehearsed, I thought, or at least repeated enough to feel like memory. I said. Okay. And I let it go, and we talked about Zoe's pageant, and he paid the check. But on the drive home, I made a note in my phone. Dad doesn't know about the pending sale, which meant one of two things. Either my mother and Rachel hadn't told him, or he was a better actor than I'd given him credit for. I was betting on the former, which meant when everything came out, he was going to be blindsided too. I filed that away. It would matter later. The second move was Rachel. I texted her on a Thursday evening, casual, the way sisters text. Hey, been thinking about Grandma lately for some reason. Do you still have any of her stuff? Old photos or whatever? Would love to look through some things together sometime. She responded in under 4 minutes. OMG, yes. I have boxes of her stuff in the basement, so sweet that you're thinking of her. Let's defio do this after the holidays. Sounds perfect, I wrote back. Then I put my phone face down and sat with what I'd just learned. Rachel had answered immediately. No hesitation, no deflection, nothing that suggested she was worried. She thought I was being sentimental. She has no idea I've been to an attorney, I thought. She has no idea I've seen the auditor records. She's been sitting on this for 6 years and she thinks she's safe. Good. Let her. But then, 40 minutes later, something shifted. My mother called. Not a text, a call. At 8:47 on a Thursday night. My mother does not call on weeknights unless something has happened. I heard you texted Rachel about Grandma's things, she said. Her voice was doing the warm thing, but there was something underneath it. A tightness. I was just feeling nostalgic, I said. Why? Oh, no reason. A small pause. The kind of pause that is full of something. It's just you know how emotional Rachel gets about Grandma. I don't want her getting all stirred up right before Christmas. I didn't mention anything emotional. I just asked about photos. I know, sweetheart. Another pause. Is everything okay with you? You've seemed a little off lately. There it is, I thought. She's fishing. Everything's great, I said. I've just been busy. How are the Christmas plans coming? She pivoted immediately, gratefully, into Christmas logistics, and I let her talk for 12 minutes about the centerpiece she was planning and whether to do a ham or a prime rib this year. I made the right noises. I said I'd bring a side dish. After I hung up, I sat very still. She'd called Rachel within 40 minutes of my text. 40 minutes. That told me exactly how alert they both were, underneath the normalcy, how much they'd been waiting, even without knowing it, for something like this to surface. They were nervous. They just didn't know why yet. I picked up my phone and texted Patricia. I think we should move up the timeline. Can we talk Friday? Patricia had in the meantime uncovered something I hadn't known to look for. The buyer of the Indianola property, a young couple relocating from Pittsburgh for a job at Nationwide, had spoken to her office in a brief professional exchange about a title concern. What emerged was this. Their mortgage lender had flagged an irregularity in the chain of title during underwriting. Something about the 2018 transfer hadn't cleared cleanly. The lender had asked for additional documentation. The sale was already wobbling. It just didn't know why yet. Rachel's realtor is going to have to disclose this to the buyers at some point, Patricia told me on Friday. If the title is clouded, which it is, because the original transfer was fraudulent, the sale cannot close cleanly. The buyers could walk, and if they walk, they get their deposit back. Rachel and Brian lose the deal. I thought about what I knew that Rachel and Brian were in contract on a new house, that their down payment was almost certainly coming from this sale, that the closing dates were probably uncomfortably close together. When would the lender's documentation request come due? I asked. Based on what I know about their timeline, they'd need a clear title resolution before December 30th to stay on track for a January 14th close. December 30th. I looked at my calendar. Christmas dinner at my parents' house was the 26th. 4 days, I thought. 4 days after I walk into that dining room, I ask Patricia to hold the letter. Don't file, don't send, not yet. I'd like to deliver it personally, I said. At Christmas. A beat of silence. Claire, she said, and I could hear the attorney in her choosing words carefully. That's your call to make. Just make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. I am, I said. I want them to understand what they did in a room where they can't pretend they didn't hear it. I want my dad in that room, and I want to look at my mother's face. Patricia said nothing for a moment. Then I'll have clean copies ready by the 24th. I spent the week before Christmas cooking, wrapping presents, taking Zoe to look at the lights on Broad Street, and doing absolutely nothing that looked like preparation. I called my mother twice. I answered Rachel's group chat messages. I confirmed I'd bring the roasted carrots and the dinner rolls. Brian sent a separate text asking if I could also bring a dessert because Rachel had been so stressed lately. I said, of course I will, I thought, standing in my kitchen at 11 at night, staring at nothing. I'll bring the dessert. I'll bring the rolls. I'll bring everything you ask me for right up until the moment I don't. I picked up the envelope Patricia had messengered over that afternoon. 3 copies inside, one for my mother, one for Rachel, one for my dad, because he deserved to know even if he hadn't done it. I put the envelope in my tote bag, under my good wool coat, next to a card I'd signed from Zoe to her grandmother that said, Happy Christmas, Grandma, I love you, in 7-year-old handwriting, with a drawing of a reindeer wearing what appeared to be a party hat. I sat down on my kitchen floor. I don't know why the floor, it just felt right, and I let myself feel it, just for a minute, the grief of it, because there was grief in it. This was not a stranger. This was my family, the people who should have been the ones I didn't have to defend myself against. I know, I thought. To no one. To Grandma Lottie, maybe. I know. Then I got up, I put the kettle on, I went to check on Zoe. Christmas was in 4 days. I had everything I needed. She walked into that house on December 26th carrying dinner rolls, a dessert, and an envelope. Her mother hugged her at the door. She hugged her back. And she waited for the right moment to set it all down. My mother's house on December 26th smelled exactly the way it always has. Cinnamon, candle wax, the particular warmth of a house where the oven has been running all day. She hugged me at the door in her good cardigan, the burgundy one she saves for occasions, and told me I looked thin and that I should eat more. I will, I said. I brought rolls. I set everything in the kitchen. I hung my coat, the envelope still in the inside pocket, on the hook by the back door. Zoe was with Derek for his Christmas. My arms felt strange without her, the way they always do on his weekends, like I'm missing a limb I've grown accustomed to. Rachel and Brian were already there. Brian was in the living room watching football with my dad. Rachel was in the kitchen opening wine, and she smiled when she saw me, that easy, uncomplicated smile of someone who had not spent the last 6 weeks building a legal case. I'm so glad you came, she said, and I think she meant it. That was the part that still got me even then. She genuinely meant it. I know, I thought. That's what makes it so hard. We ate at 6, prime rib, because my mother had decided against the ham, the carrots I'd brought, the rolls. Rachel's green bean casserole, same as always. My dad poured wine. The table looked the way it's always looked. The good china, the cloth napkins my mother irons, the candles she lights and then worries about all evening. I waited, not anxiously, just waited. The way you wait when you know what's coming and you've made your peace with it. I ate my dinner. I answered questions about work. I asked Brian about his pellet grill because it was the easiest way to keep him talking for 4 uninterrupted minutes. You're so calm, I told myself. And I was. I genuinely was. Not the performance of calm, actual calm, the kind that lives on the other side of having already decided something. After dinner, my mother started clearing plates. Rachel stood to help. I said, actually, before we clean up, I have something I want to share. 4 faces turned toward me. My mother sat back down. I'd thought about how to do this for weeks. I'd thought about speeches, confrontations, the kind of scene where everything gets said that has never been said. I'd written and deleted versions of it in my head across dozens of sleepless nights. What I actually did was reach into my coat pocket and take out 3 envelopes. Plain white, their names written on the front in my handwriting. Mom, Rachel, Dad, because my dad deserved to know, even though he hadn't done it, and I was not going to let my mother decide later what version of the truth he received. I set them on the table. Open them, I said. Rachel picked hers up first. Turned it over. Some small animal instinct flickered across her face, and I watched her push it back down. My mother opened hers with the careful, precise movements of someone trying to appear unworried. My dad looked at his name on the envelope for a moment before he opened it at all. The room was completely silent except for the sound of paper. I watched them read. Rachel finished first. She set the page down. She looked at the table, not at me. Her face had gone very still in the way faces go when the body is managing something the expression hasn't caught up to yet. My mother read more slowly. I watched her eyes move across the page twice, then stop. My dad read it the slowest of all. He got to the bottom, and then he picked it up and started again from the top, which told me everything about how he was processing it. The silence stretched. Outside, a car went by on Bryden Road. The candles flickered. Rachel said, "This is Claire, this is a misunderstanding." Her voice was careful, not panicked, careful. "Mom asked me to manage the estate because you were going through your divorce and we didn't want to burden you. I handled the transfer for the family." I looked at her. "Your name is the only name on the deed, Rachel, because it was easier for one person to manage." "For 6 years?" I said. "It was easier for 6 years? You managed my 50% of the rental income for 6 years without telling me?" She opened her mouth, closed it. I slid one more page across the table, the one Patricia's office had pulled from the county recorder, the transfer document. My signature, or the thing that was supposed to be my signature, at the bottom. "That's not my handwriting," I said, quietly, factually. "I've had it examined." My mother's chair scraped back slightly. Not standing up, just the involuntary movement of a person whose body wants to leave a room that the rest of her is still trying to manage. "Claire." Her voice dropped into the register she uses when she wants to make something my fault. "I cannot believe you would bring this to Christmas dinner. In this house. After everything Diane," my dad's voice. Low, level, a tone I had never once heard him use with my mother in 34 years of watching them together. She stopped. He was still looking at the page. He hadn't looked up yet. When he finally did, he looked at my mother, not at me, not at Rachel, and he said, "Did you know about this?" The silence that followed was a different kind of silence than the one before. Heavier, older. My mother's face did something complicated. The warmth drained out of it in a way I'd never seen before, not replaced by coldness exactly, but by a kind of nakedness. The expression underneath all the expressions. She didn't answer him. That was its own answer. Brian, to his credit, or his cowardice, depending on how you look at it, stood up and said he was going to get some water, and did not come back to the table for a long time. Rachel started to cry. Not performatively, genuinely. The way you cry when something you've been holding for years finally has nowhere left to go. She said, "We were going to tell you. We were going to figure out how to—" "When?" I asked. I wasn't angry when I said it. I was just asking. "When were you going to tell me?" She didn't have an answer. "The property is under contract," I said. "It closes January 14th. My attorney has already filed a notice with the title company flagging the fraudulent transfer. The sale cannot close cleanly until my ownership interest is legally resolved." I paused. "Rachel, you're closing on the new house. When is it?" She looked up. "January 17th, she whispered. 3 days after." I nodded. "I know." The color left her face completely. Here is the part I want to be honest about. I did not feel triumphant. I want to say I did, because it would be a cleaner story, a more satisfying story. But what I actually felt, sitting at that table with my father's hands flat on the tablecloth and my mother's face stripped of its warmth and my sister crying into a cloth napkin, was something quieter and sadder than triumph, something closer to grief with the roof taken off, all that open sky. This is what was under it, I thought. This whole time, this is what the family was sitting on. I stood up, I put my coat on, I picked up my tote bag. "My attorney's contact information is on the last page," I said. "She's available through the holidays for anything time-sensitive. Given the closing date, I'd suggest Rachel call her by the 28th. My dad stood up when I did. He followed me to the back door. He looked like a man who had aged 10 years in 45 minutes, which I understood, because he had. "Claire," he said. "I didn't—" He stopped, started again. "I didn't know. I know, Dad." I believed him, I still do. That's its own problem, but it's not the same problem. He looked at me for a long moment. His eyes were wet. He was not a man who cried often. and I could see him fighting it, and I felt something toward him then. Not forgiveness exactly, not yet, but something adjacent to it. Something with room inside it. "I'm sorry," he said. "Just that." "I know," I said again, and I hugged him briefly, genuinely, and then I walked out to my car. It resolved the way these things resolve, when one side has a lawyer and the other side has a deadline. Rachel called Patricia on December 28th. There were tense conversations I was not part of, negotiations I let Patricia handle entirely, because that is what you pay an attorney for, and also because I knew that if I was in the room, I would have to look at my sister's face, and I wasn't ready for that yet. The settlement was reached on January 3rd. Rachel and Brian paid out my share, not the full 6 years of rental income. Patricia negotiated a number slightly below that in exchange for speed and no criminal filing, plus 50% of the sale proceeds from the Indianola property. It cleared my account on January 10th, 4 days before the closing. Their house purchase closed January 17th, as scheduled. I did not tell anyone what I did with the money. I'm telling you because this is the whole story. I paid off the remainder of my car loan. I put 3 months of savings into an account I opened for Zoe a 529 for college, because she's 7 years old and she is going to want to go somewhere, and I am going to make sure she can. I donated a portion to the art program at her school, anonymously, enough to fund supplies for the rest of the year. And I took Zoe to a weekend at an indoor water park in Sandusky in February, just the two of us, because she had been asking about water slides since September, and I had kept saying maybe someday, and someday had arrived. She screamed down every single slide. She talked to every child within a 15-foot radius. She left a trail of wet footprints across every surface and lost her goggles twice, and ate an entire order of cheese fries by herself at dinner. She was, by every reasonable metric, a complete handful. I watched her from a pool chair with my feet in the warm water, and I thought, they wanted to keep her out of the photograph. Look at her. How do you leave this out of anything? I haven't spoken to my mother since December 26th. My dad called in late January. We talked for 20 minutes. Careful, quiet, both of us feeling around the shape of what was possible. It wasn't much, but it wasn't nothing. I think we're both still deciding what it is. Rachel sent a text in February, just, "I'm sorry, Claire. I know that's not enough. I read it 4 times. I haven't answered it yet. I'm not sure I will. I'm not sure I won't." Those feel like different questions than the ones I was asking 6 months ago, and I'm not ready to answer questions I haven't finished forming. Some nights after Zoe's asleep, I sit at the kitchen table, that same table where I first opened the folder, where I first ran the numbers, where I first understood what had been done to me, and I think about my grandmother, about the fact that she sat down with an attorney in 2015 and wrote language specifically designed to make sure I was taken care of. That she saw something coming, maybe, or just wanted to be certain, that she loved me with enough precision to put it in writing. Thought of you, she used to write in the margins of the newspaper clippings. I think about her and I think, I read it, Grandma. I finally read the fine print. The birthday party photographs were never printed. I found out through a cousin, offhandedly, months later. The order had been quietly canceled sometime in November, in the middle of everything. All that the venue, the caterer, the expensive photographer, my daughter barred at the door to protect the composition, and there are no photographs. I don't say that with satisfaction. I say it because sometimes the ending isn't what you planned for. Sometimes it's just the thing that happened, and it's enough. And you close the folder and you go to bed, and in the morning your daughter is asking for triangle pancakes, and the light is coming through the kitchen window at that low February angle that makes everything look a little like Grace. And you make the pancakes, and you sit down together, and that's it. That's the whole thing. They wanted to keep her out of the photograph. Look at her. How do you leave this out of anything?